Welcome everyone to tasting number 120 of the Saratoga Whiskey Club. Yeah, another 10 knocked off. We're rolling right along here. I sent out an email earlier today with kind of the schedule for the rest of the year, and still quite a bit to come, which is fun. And already thinking about next year. Holly and I have been talking about a lot of ideas and plans for 2023. And we're excited about it. I think we have a really great group of people now, and it's growing every month. And I think next year is going to be really big. But tonight we are going to focus on one of my favorite areas of Scotland, Campbelltown. And just before we get into the whiskeys, however, just a couple of notes. There is an online scorecard. If you want to score these whiskeys, you're welcome to use that. We have a scorecard here on the tables as well for people. If you have any questions about that, feel free to chime in. Pretty easy to figure out though. Every category is out of 25 points, and just do your best. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. It's very subjective. Yeah, so I think that's it for the admin. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do 7 whiskeys tonight, which might be a lot, but there's an opportunity to taste 7, so we are doing it. And hopefully by the end of this tasting, you can still taste the last couple. I believe you will. You know, and again, you don't have to drink all of it. You can just sip what you can. Yeah, I know, John. But this is Whiskey Wednesday, so I don't tell anybody what to do on Whiskey Wednesday. But
the tip is from Whiskey Tuesday and Whiskey Thursday.
Well, there's the Tuesday tipple. There's Malt Monday. I mean, there's lots of things we can come up with here.
Always Thirsty Thursday.
Thirsty Thursday. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Actually, this first whiskey that we're going to do tonight is a great kind of palate starter. I wanted to kind of have a whiskey that we could kind of just get our palates wet and started. But this is a great one. We've actually had this in the shop now for quite some time. This is the only bottle. Oh, actually, the Kilkerrans came from here, but nobody was buying them, so I bought them for the club, and there you go. But the Gauldrons is the only one that actually we have out of all of these that we're tasting tonight. I do have some info on this because it's quite interesting. This bottle has quite the design on the front. I'm holding it up right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about this because it's kind of interesting. I didn't know much of this until I read some stuff online here just in the last 20 minutes. All right, the group just arrived, so bear with me here.
Don't wait for us.
We're not waiting for you.
We did. How will we split up here?
So there's should be 4 seats.
4 seats and 4 people.
Perfect. All right, so let me read a little bit about the Gauldrons. So guys, we're just on the first whiskey, so we haven't gotten really that far. So this is coming from Douglas Laing. Some of you know Douglas Laing. They're an independent bottler in Scotland. And I found some information on Malt Review, which is a website, which had actually some cool stuff on this first bottle, which really, again, like I said, is kind of a palate cleanser. But it's called the Gauldrons, which means a bay of storms. It's a limited edition, small batch release of blended malts. So there's no grain in this. This is a blend of malts. It's not like your typical blend, which would be a combination of single malt and grain whiskey. So the ones that come, this person says, the ones that come from Douglas Laing and Weems, and we've talked about Weems a little bit before, are some of the best blended malts that this person has found. And I thought that was kind of cool because I hadn't thought about Weems so much about that. But the label. So let's get back to the label. It's a spider and it's web. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, but the spider served as inspiration to King Robert the Bruce. And having been defeated by his enemies, he saw a spider building its web with great patience yet difficulty. It encouraged him to try and try again. So that's interesting. But this blended malt's just coming from one region, and this is Campbeltown. So this really worked out well for this tasting. It's a really nice, easy sipper at 46.2% ABV, non-chill filtered, small batch bottling. This is batch number 2. So this person consulted one of the people at Douglas Laing to ask him what was in this batch. There's so far 6 batches. This is batch number 2. 3,000 bottles released per batch. So there's only 3 distilleries in Campbeltown. There's Glen, Scotia, there's Springbank, and there's Glen. Those are the 3 that are in Campbeltown. Campbeltown at one point was the most populated town with distilleries a long, long time ago, with over 60 distilleries at one point, but now they're just down to 3. And there's a lot of question, where does this malt come from? They don't actually say it on the bottle, other than the fact that they say it's Campbeltown blended Scotch whiskey. Those people who taste this bottle can pretty much recognize right away which distillery is predominant of the blended malts in it. And it actually, I think we can all agree, it's probably Glen, Scotia, which makes up the majority of this blended malt. So let's give it a taste, a little Slanchava to Campbeltown tasting number 120. Cheers, everyone.
I know it's a blend, Charles, but are they saying it's from multiple distilleries, or could it potentially all be a blend of one distillery?
So the question was, does it say anywhere on the bottle that it's a blend of all 3? No, it doesn't. It just says Campbeltown blended malt.
Okay.
So, you know, we're assuming, and Holly and I talked about it a little bit, you know, there's probably a tiny bit of some Springbank in here. You don't get the funk, you know, that you would get with Springbank. So, you know, there's probably 95% Glen, Scotia. Maybe there's a little bit of Glen in here as well, which would be Kilkerran. Who knows? They don't say.
Could they call it a blend and have it still be from one distillery?
I mean, technically they could.
Yeah. Just to like throw people off.
Probably the same percentage of Port Ellen that's in Big Pete.
Yes, there you go. Right.
Well, Charles,
Dropper.
if it's all from a single distillery, doesn't that make it a single malt? I thought it would have to be multiple to be a blended malt.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Peter. I mean, unless there were 2 different real styles coming from one, but I think that's correct. It would have to be, right, Holly? It would have to be at least 2 distilleries.
Yeah.
To call it.
Legally, that would mean that you could find blended malts inferior, which we don't. But I don't know if you could I don't think you legally could put it on. I don't know. I think it would have.
I think it has to be 2 distilleries at least. So there's probably, like Ari was mentioning, a tiny drop. You know, we've heard of this in Japan quite a bit, where they teaspoon whiskey into a blend, which, you know, keeps sometimes those distilleries from having to disclose what brands are in it. So, you know, that's.
I thought this tasted.
What's
I
that?
thought this tasted I thought this tasted Japanese.
I've heard of the Princess and the Pea, John, but I didn't know you could identify from a teaspoon of whiskey in a barrel, but okay.
Anybody have any notes on this, or likes, dislikes?
I'm getting some pears, peaches, apricots,
Pears, peaches, apricots,
Fruity, a little spicy.
fruit. I get a tiny bit of salinity.
Yeah, I wrote salinity down, Charles. Sour green apples, salinity. pepper.
Anybody getting any smoke?
No,
Yeah, I'm getting like a little licorice or something at the end, something kind of,
Mint-
yeah.
mint and licorice.
Minty, citrus.
Minty, cinnamony.
Very nice.
Good.
Very nice.
Yeah, this is a great, you know, for an introductory whiskey, if somebody doesn't know Campbeltown, you know, and we have a bottle of this open earlier. We had a bottle of this open, and we tasted it on a lot of people who came to the shop, and you know, it's one of those that it's hard to go wrong. This is a pretty solid blended malt.
What does it sell for?
To a fall.
Charles, what's the price?
65.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
How does this compare to the Rock Island?
I had a Scotch Malt Whiskey Society one.
So Rock Island is a combination of Isla and Highlands, right? Is it just islands? It's all islands. So you're gonna have, actually with the Rock Island, I remember there being a little bit more peat. So there's a little bit more smoke on those. You do get, you know, some decent amount of the Highland peat influence on that as well. So more like a Talisker or Highland Park influence. It's not your typical Isla, you know, peat. It's got some of that in it, but it's more of a broader stroke. You know, it's definitely more peaty than what we're drinking right now. But not overwhelmingly, but very good. We've enjoyed that one as well.
That's the rock oyster you're talking about? It's nice, but it's a defective bottle. That hole in the top is apparently allowed everything to escape.
We let Peter go this early on in the tasting.
I think I would have gotten that one. Yeah.
Just for the record, I've muted myself. Charles hasn't had to do it yet.
Yeah, no. Glen Scotia is a very.
Oh, Rock Island, yeah, not Rock Oyster, Rock Island.
It used to be rock oyster, but they thought people didn't like the story. I heard.
Oh, Holly said it used to be
Like
Rock Oyster. Okay, the oyster turned people off, so.
They wanted to initially call it Rock Lobster, but that was already taken.
Boy, we missed you, John.
That was Thursday.
John's not doing the calendar this year, just FYI, everyone.
What?
Yeah, so.
Just giving everyone else a chance. That's all.
Oh, boy.
There you go, Ian.
No.
That's a cool one.
Nice. I like that one. I think it's a really great one to start with. Oh, hey guys, if you want to fill up those bowls with these, I forgot to do this. There's some glass bowls on the table.
Sure, dude.
Okay, ready for to move on to number 2?
What was the ABV? I didn't get it correct.
46.2.
I reversed my numbers. I thought it was quite low when I wrote. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to move on to Kilkerran. Let me talk a little bit about Kilkerran and Glengyle. So as we mentioned, there are 3 distilleries in Campbeltown. I believe there's one that was announced that's going to be being built, or I remember reading something a few months ago. Yeah, I know. So there will be 4 at some point. Oops, we forget.
Listen to the podcast. That's
Yeah,
what
just
they
listen
said.
to one of our podcasts. We did talk about
No
it.
spoilers.
It was a tough name.
All right, so Glengyle. Interesting. Glengyle. The actual name Glengyle, if you separate it into 2 words, so Glen and Gyle, is actually a name that's owned by Loch Lomond. So Glengyle Distillery, which is 1 word, it cannot call their malts Glengyle 12-year or Glengyle 16-year because of the fact that Loch Lomond owns that name. So it's kind of interesting. So their names for their malts is Kilkerran. And we're going to be trying 2 of the kind of more recent releases from Glengyle, the Kilkerran 12 and the Kilkerran 16-year. But it is the 3rd modern working distillery in Campbeltown after Springbank and Glen, Scotia. It's actually the refurbishment. It's not a new distillery. The facility was actually founded in 1872 by one of the co-founders of Springbank. The distillery, like so many others, fell on hard times and was sold and then mothballed in 1925. But the building was renovated and re-equipped with stills from the closed Ben Wyvis distillery in the year 2000. So they've been around 22 years now, and their first spirit ran in 2004. They're owned by Mitchell's Glengyle Limited, which is affiliated with the owners of Springbank. So they are still connected. The Kilkerran name comes from this Gaelic term for head of the lake of St. Kieran's Cell and refers to a local historic settlement. Glengyle Distillery uses local water source for proofing. And let's see, anything else interesting here? So yeah, they have standard expressions, which includes their 8-year cask strength expression, which is really nice. Their heavily peated expression, which is also really great, and their flagship 12-year-old. So they do use Springbank's floor maltings to malt its barley, and Springbank's warehouses to mature. And they're bottled at Springbank's bottling hall. No chill filtering, and you'll find that pretty much with everything in Campbeltown. So
that they named this a 3rd distillery so they can get a region, since it's so tied to.
yeah, so the question was, did they name a new distillery so that they could actually create a region? And that's probably
Oh,
what.
the new one?
Yeah. Oh, they got it. Yeah, so they got it with 3.
Right, that's what I'm
So
saying.
Glengyle made it a region.
But they had lost it.
Campbeltown is its own region. So Kilkerran 12 is very lightly peated, only 15 ppm. So that's the phenol measurement, which is pretty light. It's 70% ex-bourbon casks and 30% ex-sherry casks, and bottled at 46%, no chill filtering. So
Hey, Charles, is the 12 and the 16, are they like the Springbanks in that they're different every batch, or are they always the same?
I believe from what I know that they're the same. However, I was a little caught off guard with the 16 this year as being with the percentages that are in it, which I was going to talk about, but it's 96 bourbon and 4 Marsala. So I don't know if that is normal. I believe, however, the 12 is pretty customary with the 70-30 split. But I'm not sure about the 16.
I'm sorry, you said the ABV, but I didn't catch it.
46.
Thanks.
Yeah, both this and the 16-year are 46%.
I really think this would be in like my 5 desert island drams. Like
Wow.
I think this is so.
I agree. This is a very nice taste.
Nice early.
I like sort of the light peat.
Yeah, no, it is a very nice introductory, whiskey for this tasting as well.
What's the ABV?
46%.
And no one was buying this.
Yes, nobody was buying it.
Wow.
I know.
I don't know how they missed
We
it.
had, I think, 2 bottles, and somebody bought the first. Actually, Chad, did you buy a bottle?
16.
Oh, you got the 16. Yeah, somebody bought the 12 pretty early on, but then the other one just sat there and sat there.
It
And
was on the bottom shelf. People don't realize.
it's,
how
oh yeah, it was
bottom-
a bottom,
Because
it was
they
the
don't
bottom
have the
shelf.
pretty
for-
packaging.
Relativity.
They have very bland packaging, which is probably why they don't move as much.
And it's a name that, you know, people don't recognize. And I mean, we
It
talked
sounds
about
Irish.
Campbeltown.
The eights like fly off the shelves and they sell for like $300 and. But I mean, I always make sure I have one of these in my shelf.
It's very nice.
I'm getting a little funk on the palate.
You're getting a little funk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The finish is really nice. Would they use like, so you said they use Springbank's floor malts?
Yep.
So with a light peat like this, would they use like 10 or 20% of the peated malt and then the rest would unpeated, or would they just lightly?
I think it's lightly peated.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 100%.
Yeah, I don't think it's a combination of
Okay.
different.
Okay.
It is interesting when you visit Glen. They do only produce during a certain time of the year. They're not operating every month. And it's really a pretty short season from what I remember. And, you know, a couple of times that I've been to the distillery, it's both times they haven't been actually making whiskey. So I think it's a pretty short season.
I haven't had anything peated in a while. And so when I tasted this, it jumped out at me, but on further tasting, it was much less apparent than it was initially.
Are they taking the, no, I didn't, no, the Pappy Van Winkle approach? If Kim said that the 8 years are $300, then they don't have to make that much. They can just sell it for a lot. I don't, is it a question of demand? Are they trying to control demand, or why?
I don't think they sell, I don't think they sell the 8s for 300. That's just like, if you try to find a bottle by me, that's what it's gonna be.
Where's that?
New York.
Yeah, sometimes you can get lucky and find them, you know, for regular retail or, you know, not triple the retail, but they're really getting hard to get. I mean, even the 12 and 16 are difficult to get. And Springbank in general, not Glen necessarily, but Springbank has just absolutely blown up over the last 2 years to levels that I never would have imagined. I mean, somehow the world found out about Springbank, or at least what these bottles are worth, or what they think they're worth, or demand. And I mean, I'm seeing bottles that were $150, $200 a few years ago selling for $1,000 right now. So it's absolutely, you know, crazy how everything's just blown through the roof.
I saw a big.
If you go to Whiskey International online, so they're selling this year's 12 for 60 pounds, but
Okay.
they're selling last year's 12 for 150 pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I didn't know they had it shot up. That
It's for those Springbank and Longrow and Kilkerran fans, it's actually a sad time, I have to say, because it's no longer the secret that it used to be. We just did a tasting a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago now, of Springbanks, and we had actually was it a 30-year Springbank? Yeah, we had a 30-year Springbank single cask from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. We had some other incredible Springbanks. I mean, you would never be able to do a tasting like that anymore. It's just, you know, unless you spent $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 to get all the bottles. So it was pretty crazy how things have changed. Yes. Now Holly is making a point in the chat room about how I used to dislike Springbank's new make. Well, let's talk about Springbank later. We're not there yet. We're still on Glen. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. We're almost there. All right, so we'll move on to the 16 year. Let's see here. So me see if there's anything else besides the fact that it's 96 bourbon, 4% Marsala. 46%. I did hear from some people, I can't remember if it was on Facebook or something, but they were talking about how they like the 12 more than the 16. So I'd be curious to see what you guys think about that.
I thought the 16 was lighter even than the 12. I don't know if it's what a good, you talked about the 30-year, Charles, but I don't know what a good age for spring, for the Campbeltown environment is.
Well, you can get very old there and still be fine because the angel share is really low. But you know, the typical spring banks that you would used to see were 15 to 20 years. There were quite a few in that range. There were some local barley offerings, lots of different wine casks. I know I think we did a Bordeaux and I can't remember, Burgundy as well. We did a bunch of different things, but they do like playing around with wood in Campbeltown, that's for sure. Springbank is very good at it, but this is Glengyle again. We keep jumping to Springbank, so it's hard not to.
Yeah.
Very nice.
See, there's no font. No, this one has a lot more font.
16.
You like the 16 more?
Think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet. I just went back to the 12.
A little more citrus, lighter, maybe.
It's a little bit lighter, yeah.
Yeah,
A little bit more wood on the finish.
A little more sweetness.
the sweetness. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
More.
Still more of that.
Holly says she smells more sherry on this than the 12.
Yeah. I'm getting the sweetness up front, and the finish is drier.
A little more bitter on the finish too.
Exactly.
Yeah, bizarrely, I found the finish of the 12-year.
I think I bought the 16 from you guys and I hadn't opened it yet. And I was a little bit worried because I knew how much I love the 12. And I think it's like a cool cousin. Like I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's a different experience.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, these are actually so different as well from the other two Kilkerrans, you know, the 8 and the heavily peated. I mean, it's kind of fun to have all of those, you know. You could really go on a little journey just with those 4 bottles alone, and they're all very good.
They're lovely drams. I mean, while there's a little bit of a bitterness on the finish, it's not overly so. I mean, it's not to a fault.
No, but I think in the end, I like the 12 better than the 16.
It's a little bit more powerful, even if it's not high alcohol. I don't think this one is either. Probably also about 46. So
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Smoking the 12, but and 16. Like I can use a little smoke it. We'll mix them, blend them together.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, maybe come back to it.
yeah, I like a little
Might
in
actually
there.
try that.
Yeah, so the 8 is cash strength, which is it's very good. That one's 58.1%.
What is?
The 8-year-old cash strength.
The heavily peated stuff, right?
Yeah, and then the heavily peated.
That's good stuff.
We actually did get a heavily peated into the shop, and it went pretty quickly. That one, I believe, is. What's the percentage on that one?
Depends on-
I'm really not sure which one I like better.
Heavily peated is 59.3%, so quite a bit higher. than both of these that we're tasting. I mean, these are kind of, more of your, relaxing dram, maybe sit back and, not worry about where you're going to be walking to in a little bit,
What's the price point on these?
So the 12-year-old was around 110, I believe. And then the 16 was like around 160 or so. I can't remember exactly, but they were in that range.
12-year-old's the better value. I mean, for definitely for the money, I would go for the 12 over the 16. But just all else being equal, it's hard. It's a hard choice.
They're both lovely in their own ways.
Yeah.
We all were in Kentucky the week before that.
Oh, go back to the 12. I mean, the bourbon notes come out quite profoundly on that too. Yeah. Wow.
It makes me like the 12 better.
Yeah.
I had the 16. I like it better.
Yeah, I think I might be leaning towards the 12 as well.
I think if I had to choose one over the other, I'd go 12.
Certainly at the price point.
I think I'm there taste wise as well. They're both good. Definitely. Interesting that you would rank that in your top five desert whiskeys, though. That's a big statement.
Well, just because, I mean, I feel like it's a very specific exercise.
Yeah.
But like, to me, it's like something that you could have over and over and over.
Right.
It doesn't really matter my mood. Like, I don't have to worry about like, oh, it's, it's too peated for today, or it's too sweet, or it's just, I don't know. To me, it's just like, I feel like I could hand that to anybody. I've given that to people who like don't really like Scotch, and they're like, huh, what is that? I want to see the bottle. Like, I just feel like it's just a crowd pleaser kind of.
Yeah. What about like other styles of whiskey? Do they fall into that top 5, or is it primarily Scotch?
I'd have some rum in there. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. A bunch of people here thought you said ramen.
Ramen's important too.
Eat that up, a little desert sauce.
A little seaweed in there. Okay, now we are going to move on to Springbank. Am I going too fast?
No, this is perfect.
Go.
Okay. Please tell me if I am, because sometimes I do that and there's no rush. I'm not running anywhere. I think you're all at home online, so you're not running anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Springbank. So Springbank, let me do a little Springbank history here, because some people don't know a lot about Springbank. So Springbank, I didn't mention, but Campbeltown is on the Kintyre Peninsula. So if you ever hear of Kintyre, that's the little peninsula that Campbeltown sits at the end of. Really beautiful bay. Across from the bay is the Isle of Arn, and I've taken the ferry from Arn over to Kintyre before. It's really a really nice area. But so it is owned by J&A Mitchell and Company, which also owns Glen. So again, they're together. They are the oldest independent bottler, which is William Cadenhead's. So we have some Cadenheads here in the shop. Really great independent bottler. They have shops in Campbeltown and in Edinburgh. Do they have a shop in Europe? Yeah, they have some shops in Europe too. And then they also own a few different blended scotches. But Springbank goes all the way back to 1828. It's one of the last surviving producers in Campbeltown. And they had, well, it says here they had over 30 active distilleries, but I know between active and illicit, they had, I think, at least 50 to 60. But they do produce different types of malt. basically labeled under 3 different names. So you're gonna have Hazelburn. Hazelburn would be their unpeated single malt. And then you have Springbank, which would be kind of their medium peated, standard peated single malt. And then you have Longrow, which is your highly peated single malt that all comes from Springbank. So 3 different names. You don't see a lot of Hazelburn sold in stores, unfortunately. Occasionally it comes through, but you see a little bit more Longrow, and then you will see Springbank. But Hazelburn, just to go back to that, was first distilled in 1997 as a 10-year-old whiskey, and then a 12-year-old came out. It is triple distilled, non-peated, and its name comes from a mothballed distillery near Springbank. Longrow, what we're drinking tonight, is highly peated, double distilled, and also named after another mothballed distillery of the same name. Standard bottling doesn't have an age statement, but then there are different Longrows using lots of different types of barrels. The red edition, which is what we're having this year, is they have Pinot Noir, Malbec, port, usually using a different type of wine cask. So whenever you see a Longrow bottle with red on the front, you're going to know that it's a wine cask. And then Springbank has a lot of different style or different ages. There's a 10-year standard, medium peated, distilled 2.5 times. And then they have their cask strength 12, which is absolutely fantastic. They're 15, 18, and 21-year whiskeys.
Excuse me, how do you distill 2.5 times?
Yeah, so it's interesting. They do, when you go to the distillery, they do walk you through the whole process from the malting floor through the distillery operations into the warehouse as well. But they do talk about that, how they do partial distillations with some of their runs. So it's basically, it's not a full triple distillation, it's a half. So they do 2 fulls and then they do a half of the third. Again, they're just trying to get the alcohol up to a certain level coming off of the still. So they're not doing a full third distillation with which one was it? With Springbank. And one of the things that they do as well is they have different hours of peat smoke. So Hazelburn just gets hot air, 30 hours of hot air on their malting floor. Springbank gets 6 hours of peat smoke and 30 hours of hot air. And Longrow receives 48 hours of peat smoke.
Oh.
So you can get an idea of the differences between the 3. There was a note, and I'm not seeing it now on the ppms, but not finding it right now.
When you said high peated, is that over a certain number of I know you referenced earlier, there's 15 ppm. Is that a certain threshold?
I think it's relative to your distillery, with Bruichladdich, obviously, with their Octomores being 160 plus ppm sometimes. I mean, they would consider themselves heavily peated, right? However, when you do get up to that, I would say 50, 55 range, that's when you're really getting into what I would consider heavily peated whiskey. But let's see if I can find the ppms.
If you take the Malbec and Beastie, for instance, it's only 5 years.
This reminds me of an Octomore in a way, in the sense that while there may be a lot of peat in it, it's not in your face. The peat is somehow toned down.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Right, exactly. That's
Here,
what
I
I'm
have a
saying,
whole
yes.
thing
So
on
the malt,
the
and then
ppm
it gets
scale.
distilled, And then the time to cask, yeah, exactly. So
Let's see here. Okay, so Hazelburn is obviously 0.
marketing.
When you go to like a Bunnahabhain 12 year, which is a great whiskey, that's only 0.5 to 2 ppm. So very, very light, almost unrecognizable. Ardmore, which is a Highland peated malt, is 12 to 13 ppm. Interesting. Kilhoman is between 12 and 20. Springbank 10 year is between 15 and 25 ppm. Let's see, Highland Park is 20. When Balvenie does their peat week, it's 30 ppm. Lechic on the island of Mull is 35 to 45 ppm, and then they have their Tobermory, which is unpeated as well. Port Charlotte's 40 ppm. Lefroy is between 40 and 50 ppm. We have the Glen Glassau Torfa here in the shop, which is a Highland malt, which is really great. That's 45 ppm, so pretty high up there. The Ardbeg 10 is 55. And Longrow 18 is 80 ppm. So really getting up there with Longrow. And then you have the Octomores. You do have the Ardbeg Supernova, which gets up to 100 ppm. But then you have the Octomores, which can go all the way up to 300 plus ppm. So again,
But
it's
very
very
few
relative.
of the Octomores.
What's that?
Very few of the Octomores taste like they're that peaty. You would think with those numbers, that's all you would taste, but that's not true for the Octomores.
No, and it doesn't, it's not multiplied like we would think. So it's not 6 times as smoky as a 50 ppm Ardbeg. Even though the
Right, but
is 300, it's not.
But isn't there something in the processing or somewhere along the line that affects how peat is comes across in the end?
Yes, I mean the longer fermentations, the distillations, the length of, if you're doing 2.5, 3 distillations, even maturation can have an effect on that as well. So yes, all of that is true.
Yeah, there's peat in here, but I don't find it overwhelming at all. I taste it, it's there, it's present, but it's really nicely integrated.
This is 51, so 51.4%. This is the 2022 edition. Last year was the 10-year Malbec, which we're doing next. So it's just kind of fun that we're doing side by side last year to this year for both this and the Glen Scotias that we're ending with. So this is 11 years in bourbon, followed by 4 years in fresh Pinot Noir barriques. The wine casks come from Grant Taylor's Valley Vineyards in New Zealand and is bottled at cash strength. 15 years.
And what's the ABV on that?
51.4.
That's a lovely draft. I really like that. I hate to ask what the price point would be for that.
So this one and the next one, I found both in Kentucky. Everybody goes to Kentucky to find bourbon. And I love to look at what Scotch they have because nobody cares about Scotch in Kentucky. And sometimes you find the best prices and the best Scotch. Sometimes Japanese, sometimes Irish, and I love it because even some of the standard core line stuff like Glendronach 18, stuff that's really expensive up here in New York is you can find it for a really decent price down there. So again, you have to drive to make it all work because then I can just throw it all in my car and bring it back. But I found the Longrow this year in Louisville at Westport Whiskey and Wine, and I found the 10-year Malbec at Party Source in Covington, Kentucky. So both of them are from Kentucky. which is far away from Campbeltown.
How much were they?
Yeah. I think the 15-year was around $160, 150, somewhere around there. The Malbec, I think, was less. It was less than that. It was 120 or one. It was. Oh, you were there, right? Oh, it was 110. Oh, so the Pinot was 110. Actually, so actually, there's somebody here tonight that was with me. He bought one too when we were there. So 110 is a pretty good price for this whiskey.
Okay. For me, it's excellent.
Well, this is the winner of the night so far.
Yeah, this is pretty incredible.
Yes, it is.
Which one?
Does anybody get like a funky cheese rind on it a little bit on the finish?
Which one are we drinking now?
On the 15.
Oh, the 15.
Not really. I got a lot of lime up front. Very a bit of acid, citric-y acid that reminded me of lime. Almost like I was drinking a tea punch going back to rum.
Yeah, no, I think I get it. I think some of that comes from the funkiness of Springbank. Some notes online here on the mouthfeel. A lot of smoke and wet, earthy notes come out first, quickly followed by wine. Definitely more wine influence than I expected from the nose. Toffee and strawberries. Burnt Mediterranean herbs and a trace of leafy bitterness. More cranberries. Saline soy sauce and smoke.
Which one are you talking about?
The 15. And the finish was long, smoky, and sweet with red fruits and salinity. So yeah, it doesn't. You wouldn't expect this to be an 80 ppm, right? I think the wine. Well, no, I don't know what the AP, but the Longrow 18-year is 80 ppm. So I don't know what the ppm. What's that? No, the Longrow 18-year is 80 ppm. So I don't know. This is a 15-year Longrow, but wine in general could mask smoke. Or at least make it seem less peaty. I've noticed that a lot with wine casks. Not that that's a bad thing. Sometimes it works out beautifully. And I have to say this is a pretty nice balance on this one.
You're giving me a
Chili.
It's a system.
Once you move it, it made more sense. Okay.
Like a jammy chili.
Yeah.
Not like a fresh chili, but like a sweeter chili. This might be fun to go back and forth with the Malbec, which is the next one. Let me pull up my Malbec notes here.
We're all geeking over the Malbec over here.
Okay. I hear there's a lot of geeking on the Malbec. All right, so Longrow from last year, 7 years in bourbon, and then transferred to refill Malbec, so not fresh like the Pinot Noir. Refill Malbec barriques for about 3 years. The casks were sourced from De Torren cellars in South Africa, which are famous for their Bordeaux-style Z or fusion wines. Bottled in December of 2020, but didn't appear in stores until early 2021. This one is 52.5% ABV, so a tiny bit higher. Not much. You would think it would be actually a little higher considering it's 5 years younger, but Oh, so the Pinot Noir, Larry, was at Westport Whiskey and Wine. I'm going to Kentucky next week, but I'm not driving. So I won't be at stores like I normally am. This is the first time I'm ever flying to Kentucky after all of these trips. So I don't feel like driving again right now.
Going back to the 15, I get a little bit more like some almost barbecue type notes.
On the note, I'm getting more barbecue.
Yeah.
Another beauty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
My favorite of the night, Charles.
So if anybody wants to know, these are what the labels look like. This is, they're red. It says red because it is a wine cask. That's how you recognize them.
Big red.
Big red. Oh God. No, not Kentucky Big Red. Let's not go there.
No.
Yeah. Oh no.
Where is she?
I prefer this 10-year-old over the other one. It just comes out just beautiful in the mouth, the feel, the whole experience, much smoother, very warm. It's lovely. I really like this better. Maybe it's the Malbec finishing that's just making it good. Yep.
Yes. I think 170.
3 years in Malbec.
So
Charles, were these, I'm sorry if you said this already, these were fully matured in wine casks or finished?
Finished. So this 10-year was finished for 3 years in Malbec, refill Malbec, and the 15-year was
4 years.
4 years in fresh.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe, I don't know about Anne, but I think I like this one better because I feel like the wine cask on the Pinot Noir kind of overshadows the spirit a little bit. You have the longer maturation and did you say it was refill or you?
No, it's fresh Pinot.
Right. This, I don't like, to me, it's like this perfect marriage of the spirit, which I just think is such a beautiful spirit. And then this cask, like just kind of overlaying it instead of kind of drowning it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting, so Malbec, some of the tasting notes on just Malbec by itself are black cherry, pomegranate, plum, raspberry, raisin, hints of coffee, leather, tobacco, molasses, and black pepper. I thought that was interesting because
But that's probably a reflection of the original. Yeah, it's almost like a lighter berry though, like a strawberry. I find versus a cherry or a blackberry.
I think that, that's really, you have to remember, and it would be fun to do a tasting that just focuses on wine cask finishing or fully matured wine cask whiskeys, but to really maybe dive into the different wines themselves and what are the tasting notes of the wines before talking about the whiskey and how that maybe reflects or doesn't reflect those notes, so.
We should do that with wine.
January.
Yeah, it's just hard to ship wine out because you have to ship a whole bottle. You can't ship little minis of wine because it'll go bad.
Actually, you can. You can.
Well,
during
tools.
the height of the pandemic, I did some virtual wine tastings where they did ship out little bottles of the wine, and it worked actually quite well.
What did they do to remove the oxygen from the little bottles?
They just filled up the bottle.
Filled it up.
Just filled it up.
If you're
I mean,
not
it's
doing,
also, they didn't send it out that far in advance either, so it wasn't taking a lot of time. And I actually did it with some pretty high-end wines, and they held up quite nicely.
They did. Okay. Well,
yeah,
maybe we'll try that.
I was going to say, if you're not using John's usual high-end wines, you could have people buy a bottle, decide which bottle of Malbec we're going to taste first before drinking the Malbec finished, and they can go to local wine stores.
So we'll do an in-store Malbec.
The one-
No, we'll go to John's store and we'll do the Malbec tasting.
Yeah. But the one thing to consider with that though, I mean, not all Pinot Noirs are the same. I mean, for example, the Pinot Noir cask was from New Zealand, which is going to be a very different Pinot Noir, say, than from Sonoma or from Burgundy.
Mhm.
You know,
Absolutely.
Right. No doubt. These are both very good. I love the mixture of peat and wine. There's no question about it. Port as well is fantastic with smoke. Some of my favorite Bunnahabhains were Moyne Port Cask. I mean, it's just beautiful when you combine those two. But
Red wine finish.
Longrows are pretty darn good too, I have to say. These are fantastic whiskeys.
It was,
I enjoyed them both. I thought they were both excellent.
Thank you for bringing them back for us.
What I do.
For the club.
Starting next year, you know, be bringing back more stuff from abroad. So finally, getting back on the road again and finding bottles that we can't even find here in the US. So looking forward to that again too. And avoiding customs. Oops, I'm being recorded, sorry.
But what kind of customs are you talking about? The custom of saying Slanchava or? Yeah.
Yes.
You know the duty is really
Good coverage,
nothing. The duty adds maybe $1, $1.50 to each.
Oh, I know,
bottle.
Ari. Yep. Yeah, no, I don't worry about it. Trust me. All right, so 8 o'clock. Should we wait a minute or should we go and do those last two? Or are you ready to move on, or are we still sipping and enjoying wine cast finish long?
And Tom was sipping.
We're still sipping. We're
Still
still
sipping?
sipping. Yeah, I'm comparing the 15 and the 10 together, and it's just, I'm really liking the 10 more and more.
You did an infinity dram?
I wish it comes in the ceiling.
Yeah, don't do that.
Because we're not sharing.
Oh, because we're right.
Mix together the 16 alcohol.
You can-
Peter has his and I have mine, so, you know, it's good.
All right, we're gonna wrap up here in a second. I have one little drop left with the 10-year. I talk more than you guys, so I don't drink as fast, so.
Yeah, kind of like more than either of them.
No, he did the 16 and 12, right?
None of these really were very peaty
Mhm.
so far. I mean,
The 12 is.
yeah, I mean, even the Kilkerrans, they were a little bit, but nothing like, you know, some of the Springbanks or obviously Isla's.
Probably all bourbon, right?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about Glen Scotia. We've had a lot of Glen Scotia over the years. Glen Scotia is kind of that. I don't know. I want to say they're the underrated. They're the underdog in Campbeltown. I've become a huge fan of Glen Scotia over the past few years. Everybody, you know, loves Springbank. We know that. People are getting to love or getting to know Kilkerran and loving it as well. But Glen Scotia has been around a long time, but they've kind of like gone through this mini renaissance, I want to say, in the last 10 years or so, where they've been under the radar, and now people are slowly starting to realize how special they are again. And you know, they're just, you know, I was in 2019, actually. Holly was with me, and Matt Coldrick, who's here tonight in person. We were on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, where it's south of Skye. It's on our way to Mull. We went along the Ardnamurchan Peninsula to visit Ardnamurchan, which is a newer distillery, and we went there, and I was really excited. I love seeing new distilleries. For me, that's really what it's all about. And I love the old, but I love the new as well. And Charles McLean happened to be there. And he was there waiting for his sons who were practicing rowing. And they were rowing across the Atlantic for a fundraiser. And so they were practicing up the coast of Scotland. And so he happened to be there. And if any of you know Charles McLean, he's a pretty famous Scotch guru, writer, you name it. He's been in movies, he's all over the place. But he was there and we got to meet him and talk with him and hang out for a little while, which was really cool. Definitely a highlight. And he kind of whispered to me when I told him where we were headed. He said, you know, when you go to Campbeltown, just don't forget about Glen, Scotia. And I was like, yeah, you know, I had been there once before, and I don't know if I had the best experience. It was great, but I didn't actually get to do the tour. I tasted some stuff in the shop. And so I made it a point of when we went this time to actually really kind of dive into Glen, Scotia a little more, because I had a lot of bottles with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, but I had never really had a lot of their core releases besides a couple. You know, the Victoriana, which I actually like a lot as a core release. But we did the tour, we had a great tasting, it was fantastic. And really ever since then, I've been all over Glen, Scotia, and it's really kind of that underrated gem that you know is there in Campbeltown and gets so overlooked, unfortunately, because it is really special. And Ian McAllister is really fantastic as well. So we are doing two very awesome Glen Scotias here to end this tasting. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society a number of years ago decided to jump in on the festival bandwagon. You know, we have the Speyside Festival now, which is getting really big, which is an earlier May festival. We have obviously the Fèche, which is a later May, early June festival on Isla. There is also the Campbeltown Malts Festival, which happens right before the Fèche begins, which is in Campbeltown. So what a lot of people do is they go to Campbeltown, they do that festival, then they go to Isla and do the full week on Isla. It's a lot of whiskey. I don't know if, you know, I recommend it highly because it's, you might lose a couple of years of your life, but it's really great. I mean, it's fantastic tasting, but it does take a toll. Yeah, it's a lot of whiskey, but I have not actually been to the Campbeltown Malts Festival. I have been to Campbeltown a couple times now, but the Scotch Malt Whisky Society now releases festival bottles for the Campbeltown Malts Festival, like they do for the Isla Festival and also for the Speyside. They also do a Highlands release as well. So last year and this year happens to be Glen, Scotia. They're big Glen, Scotia fans. That's probably where I've drank most of my Glen, Scotia is through the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. What's really kind of interesting, as a lot of us know, and some of us might not know, oops, there goes a glass. It didn't break. Scotch Malt Whisky Society labels their bottlings by numbers. So Glen, Scotia is distillery number 93. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's probably blurry. So 93 signifies Glen, Scotia. So last year's festival release was their 153rd barrel of Glen, Scotia. So this bottle is 93.153. So they've done a lot of Glen, Scotia barrels. Glen, Scotia happens to be one of those distilleries that will work with independent bottlers and sell barrels. And so you will find sometimes Glen, Scotia with other independent bottlings. That's bizarre. That glass hit the floor and didn't break. That's amazing. Yeah, so yeah, I dropped the right way. So this one's called Unusually Unique. This is the 2021 Malts Festival release bottle. I held on to this for a little over a year and a half now. because this came out in May. This, I'm going to read about it because Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is famous for their notes and their tasting notes. And but let me tell you about the bottle first. So this is an 11-year Glen, Scotia first fill. By the color of it, it's got to be bourbon. 57.3% ABV. There were 194 bottles released, only in the United States. They only allowed members of the Whiskey Society to get one bottle. So this wasn't something that you could get multiple bottles of. But this is called Unusually Unique. And let me read the tasting notes. This falls under their oily and coastal profile. Vivid seaside memories envisioned candy floss and seafood broth with sweet vanilla, motor oil, and clean wool. You gotta love the motor oil. The palate was abundant with the creamy notes of soft cheese mixed with candied pineapple and Turkish delight as honey glazed hazelnuts dipped in salt joined heather honey and medicinal suggestions. With water, the creaminess turned to clotted cream served with sea buckthorn and waxed lemons. I don't know if I've ever had sea buckthorn, but it's used quite a bit in their tasting notes. Floral flavors embraced heather and lavender with coconut and coriander seeds, while heavier notes of licorice and coffee grounds combined with light tobacco. Finally, a little ginger warmth blasted onto a finish of mussels cooked in a sun lotion sauce and sprinkled with white pepper. So there you go. Unusually Unique. 11-year Glen, Scotia, 2021 Campbeltown malts release. Yeah, suntan lotion sauce, I think.
Yeah, I put coconut and stuff like that.
Huh?
Pineapple, coconut, tropical, lavender.
Go back to that. Yeah, see, I don't find this to be like in your face tropical. You know, I don't really
No,
like
not in
the,
your face. It's
this is
like a
like
nice
just the balanced tropical.
wisp.
Yeah, yeah, a wisp of tropical.
Yeah,
A wisp of the Caribbean.
not too juicy.
Yeah, yeah.
Desert island.
Oh, wow.
Pirate tropical. Yeah.
That
My
oil,
first
the
sip.
viscousness of it, like I feel like
Holy moly.
rounds that out a little bit, yeah.
This has a lot going on.
That's what I was thinking when you read the notes. It's crazy, amazing.
Look at the legs of it too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Look at the glass. It sticks like nobody's business.
That's the motor oil.
Motor oil, yeah, there you go.
It's almost like candle wax, like the.
Charles, you're still on the 11?
Yes, yes. Getting a lot of buttery notes too on the nose. I'll tell you what, it's hard to stare at these bottles for a year and a half and not taste them. For the club. For the club.
He syringes it. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. There's a little bit, I get a little pine too there on the finish. It's, wow. This has a lot of layers. Coconut, yeah, I get the coconut a lot now. There is a whiff of kind of this funky motor oil, light, like a very tiny whiff of peat. Just kind of sneaks through a tiny bit.
Medicinal.
Yeah, salinity, medicinal, yeah.
I don't get the peat.
It's just a whiff. It's not much. It's there. It's like an underlying.
Very nice.
And this is how much on the peat scale? Sorry, I'm not too familiar with Scotch. This is kind of my first intro, so I'm trying to get a gauge.
Good question, Emma. I don't know the exact ppm on this. If anything, it's probably, 15 or lower.
Low, okay.
Yeah, it's probably really, really light.
There, but very low. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, typically with a single cask, you will notice it more because it's not influenced by other casks. However, you're not getting a lot of it, so I'm really expecting it to be just a whiff, you know. It's okay. So Holly just said Glen Scotia is usually around 10 to 15, so it's probably in that range. I would have a feeling. Maybe the alcohol hides it a little bit, you know. It is 57.3, so it's up there.
Perfume in the last one.
Yeah, I don't know the ppm.
On the 11-year-old, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's a feel rather than a taste. You know? It's not really gritty. It's finer than gritty, but there's some sort of body in the whiskey that's sort of. So I said, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a feel rather than a taste.
Never been one of those guys.
The viscosity, crunchy. But it really does leave a nice flavor, though. It's a very nice finish. I love the finish. This is one that you could walk away from, probably taste it for 10 minutes, you know, if you didn't drink any water or.
You went back to that, you still like it to this? You went back.
Wow.
And Charles,
All right.
you said this one was a first fill cask, and they didn't specify bourbon, but you're
No, they
assuming
didn't,
it
but,
is by
you
the
know,
color.
Yeah, based on color and notes, tasting notes as well. It's definitely going to be a bourbon. Sometimes you can go back and watch their videos of when they did the review prior to the release, and they'll talk about the barrel. But I didn't go back and look at that. And it doesn't say online. I'm just basing that on the color and the taste.
Of course. All right, thank you.
Yep. Well, it's not finished or anything. Yeah, they don't. It would be bourbon first and then wine second. That would be a second. Yeah, this is first fill. All right, so before we finish that first one, let me talk about the second one.
The water can.
So
Sneaky Pete's.
this year, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society did something different. With their festival releases, they didn't actually assign a barrel number. And I think they did it because they have a wider audience this year for festival bottles. So they've combined casks. So this isn't a single barrel per se, because there were 1,460 bottles of this one. But they call this the Distillery 93 rare release. It's kind of hard to see, I bet, on that. And we did a number of other festival bottles earlier this year. And they were all that rare release. So we did I remember we did a Kalila with the Isla. I think there was a Lafroig. We did some Highlands as well. We did the Auchentoshan, which was also a rare release. But this one is called Changes Faster Than a Chameleon. This is an 8-year Glen Scotia. This is 59.7%. So we've gone up in ABV a little bit. Hold on one second here. This was the USA allocation of this was 318 bottles out of 1,460. Whereas last year's it was 194 bottles, but only for the United States. So quite a different direction that the Scotch Malt Whisky Society went with this one. But let me read a little bit about this. This is also first fill barrels. I'm assuming again that it's bourbon just by the color. I'm going to read this one here. A fascinating aroma awaited us. Each time we went back, it changed. To mention just a few: aniseed, Himalayan salt, lemongrass, essential oil, seaside swimming pool. I hope they didn't in the pool. Marie Rose sauce, and extra virgin rapeseed oil.
What?
Yeah, that's what it says. The taste neat, like a cotton. The taste neat range from coughed mixture over salted caramel lime chocolate to crispy squid and prawns in a sweet chili sauce. Wow, holy crap. The addition of water released the scent of cranberry pistachio white chocolate bark with sea salt, as well as arugula salad with olive oil, lemon, and Parmesan cheese. Before on the palate, yet again, multifarious flavors of green tea, herbal liqueur, vegetable tempura with a soy dipping sauce, and freshly foraged sea greens.
Oh, they're smoking something.
That is
Couldn't
so
they be a little bit more
specific.
specific about
Have you noticed
what
that
vegetables are in the tempura?
You're
Wait.
lucky if I get 3 to 5.
All right,
like,
hold on.
tasting that.
All right, so from Ewan Campbell, who is the creator of this one, he writes, Campbelltown currently feels like a region on the Renaissance. There you go. With news of new distilleries being planned, and we wanted to explore the town's historic reputation for rich, characterful spirit. This is firmly in our oily and coastal flavor profile that is often associated with Campbelltown. There is no peat influence, but still a coastal salinity, while the first fill bourbon barrels bring a lovely woody influence with vanilla and spice to balance everything beautifully. This one actually, not only did they batch this, but it's a 700 ml. So they also went smaller in size. So welcome to the real world, the new world.
So they batched it, they wrote rare on it. And they gave it a smaller bottle.
Yeah, they batched it, wrote rare on it, and went smaller in size.
How much was it?
Marketing 101.
So this bottle was $120 plus tax and shipping. The last one was $145 plus tax and shipping. Oh, that's grapeseed oil. Rapeseed oil. Yeah. No, it's not. Yeah, it's a flower. So this is one you need to let it breathe a little bit there, Kim?
I don't think you need to, but I tried this bottle at an SMWS tasting and I didn't immediately run out to buy it, which was very weird for me because I buy basically any Glen, Scotia they release. Then I ended up buying it and then I ended up buying a second one. So I just feel like over time, I don't know if it's that it gets air or that there's something about it that I keep coming back to, but yeah, I just find that my second or third impressions are always a little bit more favorable on this bottle than my first ones.
It is sold out now. So yeah, in case you were wondering.
I mean, like I can even feel it now. I feel like my fourth sip I enjoyed more than my first sip. I don't know. I just think it gets sweeter.
Yeah, I definitely do get a lot of the notes that in the description, except the shrimp tempura and soy dipping sauce. I don't think that one, but everything besides that one. The salinity, I think I've noticed it in this one more than any other. And coming from more of a bourbon drinker, primarily is my start to whiskey. I definitely do sense that a lot more.
So coming from that perspective in general, how was this tasting?
Oh, it's really good. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and that's why I kind of asked the peak questions a little bit more because that's kind of the new realm for me. As well as I know, like the Bolton Marley is more than like corn or say for bourbon. So I think I progressively enjoyed them more. Not that the starters were bad or anything, but I think I definitely beforehand I thought the wine would I looked into it a little bit and I thought that would kind of tone down the funk of the whole Campbelltown thing. But I think the last two, I think maybe Glen, Scotia is my favorite of the distilleries of the three.
Nice.
So
that's wonderful.
Definitely, I like doing things like this because it's easier to explore a lot more and learn a lot more versus just trying to buy one bottle and then.
Yep.
Like,
that's
if you don't like it or something, then you're stuck with the whole bottle, or you don't get as much information as if a tasting.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what the club is all about. That's what we do, and it's fun to explore all of these different expressions. because that's how you learn. I mean, you taste things, you find out where you land and what you like, and don't rule anything out. You just keep plugging along. You know,
Hey, Emma, let me ask you a question. Are you doing the advent calendar?
No, I have no idea what that is referring
yeah, so
to.
Emma came on board from the first fill email that I sent out. We had some open spaces. So.
All right, next year you should try it.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. I'm from Boston, and I visited Saratoga this summer, and that's how I learned about first fill. But yeah, I'm an engineer, so I'm definitely a geek in all things and everything. I kind of attract to in that analytical mindset. So it's definitely, I'm always learning more about different things. So it's very exciting.
You're not originally from Boston because you can speak English well.
I grew up outside of Providence, Rhode Island, if you must know. So yeah, but I work in Boston, so I guess I take pride in my keeping my R's and things like that.
It seems like we have a few people on here who are not Saratoga region locals. I mean,
well,
are there more than two? Or
Nick is in Massachusetts. He's right.
I'm in New Hampshire.
And then we have Doug Wolfson, who was supposed to be on this tasting. He's not on, but he's in Massachusetts as well. So and we have Larry in New Hampshire. Kim's in New York City. Who else we got? Ari is in Staten Island. Yeah, so we got some.
I did live in Albany for a number of years, so.
All right, there you go.
I used to go summer in Saratoga and lose my money at the track, but you know.
Well, welcome to all those from afar.
Emma, you're not alone. I'm from the Boston area originally myself. So.
Yeah, Paul is in the middle of nowhere, as we continually find out.
Wait, what's the middle of nowhere compared to some of the Western New York areas?
Well, Central New York's Finger Lakes area, Southern Finger Lakes area.
Middle of nowhere. Beautiful area, beautiful, but really remote.
Here's to peace and quiet.
Yes. Nothing wrong.
I went to school in the Finger Lakes. It's amazing up there.
It's beautiful up here. It is.
It is.
Did you go to Cornell? You did?
Yeah.
I worked there for 16 years.
Emma, are you in the industry?
I'm sorry, did you say you went to Cornell for 16 years?
I worked for Cornell for 16 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kim, are you in the food and beverage industry?
I wish. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I just went back and tried it.
These are all delicious whiskeys, every single one of them.
Yes, thank you, Charles.
Very much.
Yes, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
no, thank you guys for joining tonight. I thought it was a fabulous exploration, as I called it. We touched on all three distilleries a little bit, and I really want to do more Campbelltown. I'm going to try. Maybe we'll do just the Glen, Scotia thing at some point because it's a little easier to come by. But as travels pick up as well, maybe I'll be able to find some other Springbanks and Kilkerrans. You never know. So I am going to stop the recording. I'm going to stay on though. If you guys want to stay on, no problem. But I will stop the recording so that it's a little shorter and easier to upload to YouTube. So thank you everybody for coming.
Another great experience.